This is chapter 26 of the audio version of Stories of the Gospels, a book written and copyrighted by Daniel Limpinall. Every believer who decides to follow Jesus will encounter Christians who refuse to accept their faith in Christ. And they will also be confronted with other kinds of cynical people and many others who believe in other religions. In Jesus' day, the Pharisees were only one such group of cynical people. They were Bible experts who methodically controlled the actions of the nation through the rule of law. They claimed the rule of law was from God and used violence and punishment to control every part of worship and culture. Ironically, the Pharisees were themselves harassed by their Roman overseers. For all their boasting, their rule of law was only protected by the Roman emperor in order that peace would be maintained and the taxes would support the Roman Empire. But the peace was rare, and there were constant violent struggles between Jewish factions and the Roman government. The Jews constantly, but futilely, believed that God would drive out the Romans. Each new believer in Jesus had to make choices every day how to handle all these pressures according to the teachings of Jesus. Believers today are faced with similar pressures. Jesus spent considerable time teaching believers how to handle these pressures. One day he enjoyed a fine banquet with the cynical Pharisees and boldly gave these biblical experts very grave warnings about their methods and beliefs. After the banquet, he warned his disciples about the Pharisees and taught the spiritual occupations or beatitudes that bring the blessings of heaven to the believers who desire to do what Jesus taught. Never before has God's word been so alive. Enjoy a living experience of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Stories of the Gospels, chapter 26, Challenges of Following Jesus, part 1. Jesus had just forced a demon out of a man. The gasps and shouts of the witnesses caused many more to turn to see what was happening. The news jumped from one person to another until many more people were crowded around to listen to Jesus. The news was too wonderful. They wanted to see a miracle themselves. Who has the power over demons with just a word? What was the explanation that Jesus gave? What did he claim as the reason for his power over the unseen world? It was always a big attraction. The attraction was not Jesus' motivation for doing miracles, but it was still expected and necessary. How else could he yank them out of the habitual stupor of their day-to-day affairs? Jesus wasn't trying to win friends and influence people. It appeared more like a rescue attempt for a drowning man flailing about in his powerlessness over his circumstances. Anyone who has tried to rescue in such a fashion knows that the flailing arms are impeding the rescue. They have to be stopped, or the rescuer will have to watch the man drown. Have you ever been within eyesight of a man drowning to death while the rescuer waits for the opportunity to save him? It isn't what we were made to witness. It's crushing to the soul. The rescuer has to do something. Slap the drowning man or grab his hair. No man can help another while they are fighting their circumstances. Any person swimming in the water is not strong enough to lift another person above the water so they can breathe. But if they can get the drowning man to trust them and then lie quietly on his or her back, they can pull him toward the shore where he can find solid ground to stand on. This was the way Jesus spoke as people were gathering around him. He said, "You people living today are evil. You are easily attracted to horrible accidents, weird events, psychotic experiences, superstitions, horoscopes, psychics, fortune tellers, witchcraft, and many things that can't be explained. You are not searching for true knowledge. You are searching for the weird, the twisted, or the grotesque. And even in your search for a good time, it is still merely a search for a distraction from the evil lurking inside. Then you scheme and worry, always trying to control the world around you as if your ways and knowledge is superior and absolute. You network and gossip in order to know the facts to protect yourselves from threats and to increase your social status. You are not searching for truth. You are seeking relief from evil. You are inwardly terrified even as you participate in things to bring you pleasure and comfort. Instead, you should be seeking for true ecstasy, lasting contentment, and enduring justice. But instead, you give up easily and settle for what is material, fake, and phony. Then when the real deal comes around, such as forcing demons out of this man, you are still looking for something greater to prove I am the real deal, that I am the true Messiah. Well, let me tell you, you aren't going to get any greater evidence, because even if I cause the atmosphere to evaporate and the sky becomes black in the middle of the day, you still won't believe me. So let me tell you, the only sign that you are going to witness that I am the Messiah will be the sign of Jonah. For just as Jonah, the ancient prophet, was in the belly of a huge fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so I, the Son of Man, will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. This Jonah, a stubborn, bad-tempered prophet, disobeyed God and was swallowed by a great fish. For 3 days Jonah was in the belly of the whale. Finally, near death at the bottom of the ocean, he repented. Then God had the whale vomit Jonah out on the dry land. Then finally, Jonah obeyed God and preached to the people of Nineveh. His experience became a miraculous sign, like someone who had risen from the dead. The people of Nineveh accepted it as a sign that Jonah's warning of impending doom was from God. They immediately and genuinely repented, and God withheld the calamity that he had arranged for them. In 30 days, he would have destroyed the whole city. This is what I'm telling you people today. The men of Nineveh from that ancient time will one day stand up at the time of judgment with the people living today. They will become the judges of you who are hearing my words today. Since the men of Nineveh turned to God and changed the way they thought and acted when Jonah spoke his message, they will condemn the people living today. But look, I am here, someone greater than Jonah. The ancient Queen of Sheba from the southern coast of the Arabian Peninsula will stand up at the time of judgment with the men who live today. She too will condemn them, because she came from a very long distance, across a vast desert, to hear Solomon's wisdom. But look, I am here, someone greater than Solomon. I am the promised Messiah with the good deeds to prove it, and still you want more proof. No one lights a lamp and hides it or puts it under a basket. No, we put it on a lampstand, so that those who come in will see its light. God created the earth and heavens to reveal his glory. Then he created humans. You are created in the image of God. That image is to reflect God's light. God's light makes all things visible. It reflects off of good things, while evil things appear distinctly dark. To people with good eyes who want to be part of God's goodness, they can observe the glory of God. God gave people eyes to see and observe God's glory. If a person's eye is unclouded, the image of God will be reflected completely. If a person's eye is evil, they will perceive a distinct darkness instead. Both the bright objects and dark objects can be seen when light is present. Bright objects reflect the light, while dark objects are darker than the bright objects nearby. Even people who can see God's light may not be reflecting it very well. The result is that dark, evil things can lurk close, and we can experience one difficulty after another. The worst condition a human life can experience is when God's light cannot be reflected at all. As time goes by, they are gathered closer and closer to darker and darker things. They may even get so accustomed to the dark that evil things are comfortable or necessary. You can see how easy it would be for them to get sucked into the black hole of eternal darkness when they die. However, this cannot happen when they reflect God's light. When a human life reflects God's light, they will be observed doing the works of God. These things I am doing. Because of the reflected light, the dark objects around them cannot change them, because the reflected light will also shine on others and help them keep away from darkness. God's light was created as a result of his audible voice. Let there be light. The works that I do are the works he is doing, and he is doing them the same way he created the earth and heavens. I speak what God says, and I do what God does. What he speaks and does in heaven, I speak and do in the earth. If I were doing my own will or seeking my own desires, I could not hear his voice or see what he is doing in heaven. Believe me, come close to me, and my light will begin to reflect on you. It will change you. It's not an act of your self-control. The darkness says you have to do God's will in order to reflect his light. But believe me instead. Come close to me. By the choice of your will, believe me. Come close to me. According to the desire of your heart, my light will shine on you. Believe what I say as though God is audibly speaking it to you. Believe what I do as the very works that God has decreed from heaven to be done on earth. Your spoken words will shape your future on earth. Your mouth speaks what you desire in your heart. Your words and your desires are powerful. God fulfills them when they are in agreement with each other. But remember, it's not what you speak that will bring you close to the light. However, what you say and what you do in agreement with what you say will show how close you are to me. Coming close to me is an act of your will to believe me and the desire of your heart for my light to shine on you. When you are close to me, you will want to speak my words and desire my desires. The result will shape your life, and others will experience my light that is reflected from you. They will then have to decide if they believe me and desire my light. After Jesus finished speaking, it was not unusual for him to be invited to someone's home for a meal. Today it was a Pharisee who invited him to have lunch at his house. Jesus accepted and was welcomed into the beautiful and pricey home of the Pharisee. The Pharisees were one of several divisions of Judaism. Each division had certain beliefs or traditions that separated it from others. The Pharisees were the self-elected authorities of the teachings of Moses, and some were part of the ordained leadership of the nation with God-given authority. Pharisees felt a responsibility to the righteousness of the nation. They were known to be thorough watchdogs and merciless accusers. They spent decades refining their knowledge of the original teachings that God had given to Moses, and then added to that the traditional rituals and beliefs that were taught for hundreds of years. People were terrified of a Pharisee's rebuke. Many people would have silenced them, except they were too afraid of them. So instead, people would quickly submit to them because the Pharisees were connected to the chief priests who could excommunicate a person from Judaism for life if the offense was severe enough. One such tradition they enforced was the washing of hands before a meal. Before sitting down to the meal, the Jewish tradition was to pour water 2 or 3 times over each hand. Then they were to say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us concerning the washing of the hands." This Pharisee was surprised to see that Jesus, a rabbi, didn't wash before the meal or say the prayer. He sternly rebuked Jesus. "You didn't wash." This implied, you dishonored God by rejecting his sanctification that comes from the washing of your hands. But it seemed as though Jesus disobeyed the tradition on purpose. Jesus responded to his host's accusation. "You Pharisees clean the outside of cups and dishes, but inside you are full of greed and selfish appetites. It's not what you eat that makes your body unhealthy or your soul guilty. It's the lack of faithfulness to God's nature. Stop your foolish thinking. Didn't the one who created the outside make the inside too? God created you with the body and the soul. It is the soul that defiles the whole person. The body merely obeys the soul. Greed and selfish appetites occur within the soul. These are what defile a person. So give what is inside as a gift to the poor, and then everything will be clean for you. By this he revealed that giving to the poor is a reflection of God's light. It is his will that the poor are continually provided for. Withholding from the poor darkens the soul because greed is an evil motive. Greed prioritizes selfish desires above the needs of others. Jesus also revealed that cleansing the soul is more than an offering, a sacrifice, or a solemn prayer. Although cleansing the soul is usually a continuing process, the cleansing is completed when all the selfish desires are turned outward. For example, the greed for material possessions is turned and focused on the poor, and the lust for immoral desires are turned to sacrifice its desires to protect from impurity the person our lust is focused on. When done with the right motive, these actions have a cleansing effect on our soul. Most people think it is unnatural to expect them to refrain from various kinds of immorality. They believe they need it and have a right to it. And what about greed? Most people never consider what they consume as being selfishness. It is true. God gives all good things to possess and to enjoy, more to some and less to others. What is more natural, sharing or consuming one's own possessions? But what is God's nature, sharing or consuming all he possesses? You see, God shares everything, not as a law, but as a willful motive. In truth, he defines his nature. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. Does that mean there is no consequence for selfishness? Actually, the consequence is shocking. The goodness of the earth's ecosystem is dependent on each human and how each reflects the nature of God. Not sharing is greed, and greed is idolatry. These bring death and destruction around the globe. And for instance, what is the consequence of not controlling our sexual lusts? The answer is something that is truly unnatural. Homosexual behaviors, or worse. And worse there is. Jesus pointed out greed and immoral behaviors, but he wasn't excluding other evils. So he gave 9 warnings so we can get a bigger picture. He said, "How horrible it will be for you Pharisees. You give God 1/10 of your mint, spices, and every garden herb, but you have ignored justice and the love of God that shows compassion and mercy. You should have done these things without ignoring the others." By this he reveals that tithing, giving 1/10 of your profits, is a real act of devotion to God, but only if the giver shows compassion and mercy, the sacrificial and unconditional love of God. The truth is, justice is better served through compassion and mercy than through judgment and condemnation. Jesus added, "How horrible it will be for you Pharisees. You love to sit in the front seats in the synagogues and to be greeted in the marketplaces. In truth, the praises of one person to another is vain. All praise belongs to God. How horrible it will be for you. You are like unmarked graves. People walk on them without knowing what they are." The righteousness you are promoting is absent God's light completely. Any soul close to you is unaware of their danger of being lost forever in the black hole of eternal darkness. One of the Pharisees, an expert in the teachings of Moses, said to Jesus, "Rabbi, when you talk this way, you insult us too." Jesus turned to him and continued his severe warnings. "How horrible it will be for you experts in the teachings of Moses. You burden people with loads that are hard to carry, but you won't lift a finger to carry any of these loads. You have added so many things to the teachings of Moses, with the result that God's law is like a burden that is hard to carry. The job of a minister of God is to provide the understanding and enlightenment from God that will lift a person's spirit so they have an effective motivation to do what God requires. You are so dark, you do not have this understanding and enlightenment. Even though you know you are failures of the teachings of Moses, you still punish and harass God's people with the very laws you are not able to follow yourself. Then Jesus added his sixth warning. How horrible it will be for you, and not just for you Pharisee fakers. This warning is for anyone who has ever heard or read one of my prophets' messages. You build and maintain the monuments for these prophets. The stone monuments can be seen, but your words give them honor as you read their writings, discuss them, and marvel at the miracles and signs they performed and the prophecies that came to pass. But your honor is completely fake because your ancestors murdered the prophets who spoke for God while performing many signs to prove that God authorized them, warning your ancestors about their fakeness. In fact, it is just like I'm doing right now. Since you have heard their message and read about their miracles and signs, you are now under the same responsibility of rejecting them as your ancestors. Your stone monuments and your spoken reference to these prophets have made you accomplices to their murder. You are now responsible for the murder of every prophet since the world was made because you reject me, because they also performed my miracles and spoke my words of warning. The wisdom of God spoke in the scriptures. I will send humanity prophets and apostles, generation after generation. Out of human insecurity, they will murder some of those prophets and apostles and persecute others. So each person living must carry the guilt and judgment for the murder of every prophet that existed before they were born, all the way back to when the world was made. The growing darkness and cruelty of the world around them is their just judgment and the evidence of their individual guilt and the guilt of every nation. Abel, the son of the first man Adam, was the first prophet, and he was killed by his brother Cain. Abel's blood still reflects the light of God and reveals the darkness that has affected the entire human race because of his murder. Zechariah was the prophet who was killed without mercy and without consideration of God between the altar and the temple. He was a faithful prophet who was executed in God's holy temple because of his warnings. Yes, I can guarantee this truth. The people living today will be held responsible for this. Then Jesus concluded with his seventh warning. How horrible it will be for you experts in the teachings of Moses. You have taken away the key that unlocks knowledge. With all your education, your knowledge of the teachings of Moses, and the science of the physical world around you, you are still ignorant of the truth that supports everything you know and teach. And even though you haven't discovered this fundamental knowledge, you spend your entire lifetimes making up pseudo requirements to ensure that everyone is required to learn what you know. These requirements do nothing more than prevent others from learning the key that you refuse to understand. You ordained ministers of God have made many disciples, some even more the sons of hell that you are. They will dutifully pass on the gates and bars to lock up generation after generation from the key truths that will permit my people to enter into a vibrant relationship with God and reflect the light of God. Your rules and facts are a weight that is too heavy to bear. It hinders and prevents a vibrant relationship with God's light. This relationship is key to experiencing the only reality that provides meaning and contentment to life. This relationship is key to being satisfied with one's existence without the constant lust to acquire more, and more. This concluded Jesus' scolding of his host and the Pharisees who came to the meal. The rest of the dinner was formal. The talking between the Pharisees and Jesus was polite, but the time was tedious. The Pharisees had hoped this dinner with noted guests and powerful leaders would win Jesus' favor. They were willing to make peace with him if he would stop making claims that he was the Messiah. They didn't actually want a Messiah, but they were willing to share their glory, honor, power, and access to wealth if necessary. However, they were not prepared to give it all up, as the Messiah would require. Jesus' words offended them deeply, and even as he graciously thanked them for the banquet, they held a terrible grudge against him. They assigned their best watchdogs to tail him, question him in depth, while listening and watching for anything he might do or say that would trap him. No normal human, given such scrutiny, is able to keep a good reputation. For a person to keep a good conscience while judging another person, the facts must be evaluated based upon the methods used to obtain them. Then the motivations must be considered. And finally, the judge must place themselves into the circumstance defined by the facts and motivations. And then the judge must make the judgment against themselves. Matthew 12, Luke 11. While Jesus was having dinner with the Pharisees, thousands of people had gathered. They were so tightly crowded that they stepped on each other. These people wanted to experience an emotional high, an exotic event, a display of power to wow them. Jesus was unmotivated and unchanged. He told his disciples, "Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees." I'm talking about their hypocrisy and fakeness. They put on a pious show that bring them attention as they punitively demand the attendance at grand festivals that give fake honor to God. However, everything that has been covered up or faked will not remain unknown. Whatever a person wants to hide will be made public. Whatever you have said in private will be heard in public. The more secret you want it to be, the more widespread it will be known. But my dear friends, you don't have to be afraid of this. I can guarantee that you have no need to worry whether someone kills you. Death cannot separate you from me. However, you do have someone to fear if you refuse to bow to the one that God has sent to save you. God has given me, the Messiah, the Savior, the authority to assign people to hellfire. If you are not willing to believe in me, you are already condemned to face the fires of hell. If you refuse to believe in me, you are destined to be terrified of me. But why refuse to believe me? Aren't 5 sparrows sold for 2 cents? God doesn't forget any of them, as they are caught, sold, and eaten. And you are worth more than many sparrows. Even the hair on your head has been counted. God is attentive to you. God keeps track of the minute details of your life that even you can't keep track of. So don't be afraid. Put your trust in me. Luke chapter 12, verses 1 through 7. It's not the complex rules of society that you need to worry about. No one obeys them entirely, nor has anyone fulfilled the teachings of Moses. Besides, God has already judged every person as a murderer. Therefore, consider these positions, titles, and occupations of blessed living. Being blessed is a heavenly condition that can be experienced on earth by those who occupy themselves in a manner to be blessed. There is no ecstasy, joy, peace, or happiness that is superior to being blessed with heaven's blessedness. These are the 9 occupations of blessed living. 1. Blessed are those who recognize they are spiritually helpless. They know that the weight of guilt against them is very similar to the guilt of the worst criminal and the most righteous saint. This may seem like a contradiction, but it's not. The kingdom of heaven belongs to these very honest and humble people. As they come to know they are blessed, they will experience more and more of heaven's blessedness. Today, these people seem unlikely to achieve success against spiritual forces of wickedness. But as they come to know they are blessed, they will become a strength to others who are spiritually needy or helpless. This first occupation is the foundation of the remaining 8. Don't let anyone bully you. No one can immediately perform these occupations. They come with practice, trial and error, and persistent faith. 2. Blessed are those who mourn, and before God don't deny their pain and the pain they have caused. They will be comforted by God. When they realize they are truly blessed, they will experience the comfort of heaven. These are the ones who come to know the peace of God like none other. 3. Blessed are those who are gentle, even though they do not force their own way or prioritize their own interests. They will one day own the earth as their inheritance from God for their gentleness. These are the future kings, judges, etc. in my kingdom. 4. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for God's approval. They will be satisfied. They will receive the most important value in heaven and on earth, God's approval. 5. Blessed are those who show mercy. They will be treated mercifully. Terrible experiences await those who do not hunger and thirst for God's ability to show mercy to others. Those who show mercy will know the real extent to which they have been shockingly forgiven. 6. Blessed are those whose thoughts are pure. They will see God. These people are careful to keep their conscience clean before God. They desire to see God as He truly is. They are not afraid of what God's light will reveal about them or about the world around them. These people will have knowledge of God like none other. 7. Blessed are those who make peace. They will be called God's children. God's children never defile themselves by forcing their enemies to be at peace with them. God's children radically love their enemies and serve them. They radically return good for evil. God's children trust God's promises and are kind to unthankful and evil people. God's children never fear their physical security any more than I do, the Son of God. God's children are willing to give their lives to bring reconciliation, even to only one person. 7. Blessed are those who are persecuted for doing what God approves of, who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them, like those who recognize they are spiritually helpless. When persecutions come, these people understand they are powerless against the motives of revenge and hate within them. Their humility and honesty will acknowledge before God the vengeance they feel, and they will experience a growing strength to return good for evil. This 8th occupation is the ultimate proof and the visible light of the very honest and humble people who recognize they are spiritually helpless. These people will continue to see their success in practicing each of these occupations. 9. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, lie, and say all kinds of evil things about you because of me. Rejoice and be glad because you have a great reward in heaven. The prophets who lived before you were persecuted in these ways. These people value heaven's blessed rewards as being superior to the praises of their loved ones, personal privacy, land ownership, health, comforts, pleasures, joy from physical experiences, physical peace and security, and prosperity. These people become the freest of all people. They are not bound by any material thing or circumstance. They are free, though a slave. They are free, though convicted for a criminal's offense. They are free, though tied and gagged and forgotten. The world is not worthy of these people. These people get it all, like those who are persecuted for doing what God approves of. You are the salt for the earth. The world will never appreciate your flavor, but the created elements will respond to your salt. Your saltiness will bring flavor to all that is created. The effect of salt is tasted. Without it, something is missing. What is missing requires more salt. Even old tasteless food is improved with salt. When war breaks out, salt is missing. When drama unfolds, salt is missing. When people are forced to flee, salt is missing. When a species dies, salt is missing. You are also light for the world. Your light was never meant to be hidden. Wherever God has placed you, shine and reflect God's light to every part of the dark world within the strength of your reflection. Occupy yourself as I have outlined above. This will strengthen your reflection of God's light. God's light is the good you do, which brings thanksgiving and praises to God. Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 16. Thank you for listening. Be sure to press the like button and subscribe. God willing, I will publish another chapter every Wednesday. Tell your friends about your experience listening to stories of the Gospels, and let your comments tell many more, and me too. I trust you sensed God's presence during the story. You know only our guilt keeps us from God. So confess your sin and have confidence in God. He will forgive you and cleanse you. He wants to experience life together with you. One of the most important but forgotten aspects of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that it is to be demonstrated, not merely preached. You can do this by sharing. If you don't share otherwise, you can share with others by giving to my ministry by going to my channel and clicking the donate button on the banner image at the top.